Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of I Never Knew or Inc., but my dog did podcast. I'm so happy everyone is here today. I am Maureen Scanlon, or Life Coach Maureen. I am a relationship expert, author, speaker, and podcast hostess. I am so excited for my next guest as she and I connected and I read her bio. As always, I say there's always this connection that I have, and we have so much in common. Her story is absolutely amazing, and I think everyone is going to get so much inspiration from her. She's just, you can see a light emanating from her. She's just a beautiful, beautiful soul. And at 72 years young, she has so much wisdom for all of us. I already was picking her brain before we went live. And so this is my guest, Susan Gabriel. And after a lifetime career in business development, she lives with her husband, Clark, in the country outside of a small town in Texas, where she is a full-time author, poet, and entrepreneur. And I love how she describes this. And I'm going to say this in her words because it won't be as effective without me doing that. She says, "My life has been terrible, weird, and wonderful. I went through devastating experiences that forced me to rely on a higher power to find peace. They forced me to do things I would never have believed possible. One of those things was writing a best-selling book about it called Wheels of Injustice: Saving My Child from the Child Savers." I love that title. In 1985, she met her second husband, Clark. 6 weeks after the wedding, her 9-year-old daughter was taken away by social services, and her husband, Clark, was accused of molesting her. The child protection system in the 1980s was broken and had become the very thing it was established to prevent. The situation went from bad to worse to truly bizarre. But instead of caving to the pressure, they fought back, became activists, and started a national movement for system reform. Welcome, amazing, amazing Susan. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so honored to have you. And so, of course, we always start with the story, and I cannot wait to hear what has transpired. So tell us, as far as I Never Knew, tell us what was going on at that time and what your story is.
Well, I'll start it kind of at the beginning. I grew up in a small town and with traditional background, traditional parents. We were, as girls, we were expected to grow up and be housewives and mothers, not to really have a career. So I ended up getting married in my teens. Both of us were quite young, and I had my first daughter when I was not quite 20. So I was young, immature. We weren't the best matched couple, to say the least. So that marriage ended after 15 years. I had 2 daughters at that point, and it ended. So that's all water under the bridge. Then I met my second husband, Clark, as you mentioned. We just connected. We just connected really quickly. And in fact, we met in late August of 1985, and we were married in late December of the same year. So it was only 4 months that
Yes.
we'd known each other. But we felt like we'd known each other for a really long time. And it was one of those really beautiful, magical, indescribable types of relationships. It was so wonderful. And he got along really well with my daughters too. One was 8 and the other one was just turned 15. So we were, a newly put together happy family. And 6 weeks after the wedding, I got a phone call when I was at work, and they said, "This is the Department of Social Services. We need to have you come down to our building. We have your daughter." And I just was shocked. And I said, "Well, why do you have Amber?" And they said, because that was my older daughter. And they said, no, it's not Amber, it's Emily. And so they had taken my younger daughter. The older daughter I kind of half expected, because she was a teenager, and she had decided she wanted to run away with her boyfriend. And so I mean, that I could see the social services might have gotten involved at that point with her. But my younger daughter, there was nothing wrong, nothing was going on there. So I raced down to the office there, and they told me that Clark had molested her. And I was in a complete state of shock, because I had not seen anything that would indicate that he was anything like a pedophile or any kind of behavior. And we'd only been married 6 weeks, so there wasn't that much time for for there to be any kind of hidden behavior even there. And it made no sense at all. So I said, "Well, how? What happened?" And she said, "Well, he tickled her." And I said, "Okay, well, I knew he tickled her. He was a big kid playing with her as a kid. They were, she would jump up and grab him around the neck and hold on like a monkey. And he would tickle her under the arms to get her to let go. It was just fun stuff. They enjoyed each other."
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, well, there's some, misunderstanding here. I said, where did he tickle her? She said, "Well, on his stomach and on the knees." On the knees. I'm like, well, what you're describing is not molestation. And she says, "Well, you have to believe us. This is molestation. You need to force him to move out of the house, and you cannot have him be in any kind of contact with her, or you may never get your daughter back."
Oh my God. Oh my
So,
God.
yeah, shock. They hadn't done any investigation. They just ran with this claim. And when I went, and they said, "Don't get an attorney because it'll just make you look guilty." Well, I went and got an attorney.
Good for you. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That's
I mean,
right there. Don't get an attorney because it makes you look guilty. No, I'm innocent. That's why I get an attorney. Oh,
exactly.
wow.
Right. So we got an attorney. And they advised us, the attorney, and we had a psychologist too, that our older daughter, we had her seeing a psychologist, because like I said, she was a little bit rambunctious. But we talked to the psychologist, we talked to the attorney. They said, do not move out of the house, or they will assume that means that you're agreeing to the fact that he's guilty.
Right.
And they wanted to use me to prosecute him. So, I mean, but already so far, all this is just tickling.
Yeah. Sounds
And
innocent.
yeah. And so it just snowballed after that. He went down to take a lie detector test, because he thought, okay, well, that'll clear me. Well, no, because apparently you can lie on lie detector. The police administering it can lie. And when they brought him in to discuss his results, and they said, "We want to talk to you. We want to tell you you lied." And he said, "What did I lie about?" And they said, "Everything." And he said, "Even my name?" I mean, he was really, really getting pissed off. So he he pretty much stormed out of there, and that was the end of that. But that made them mad. the more we refused to agree with them, the more we refused to accept what they were saying, and we continued to, to pursue it and to fight them, the harder they fought.
Yeah.
And so this time I didn't have, they took my daughter and put her in foster care. And the first time I saw her, I was devastated because she was dirty. Her hair wasn't combed. Her teeth, she hadn't brushed her teeth, and I don't know how long. Her dress, that she had on a dress that wasn't hers, and it was way too small. Um, you could tell she was just being neglected.
Oh my God.
And I could see that I was allowed to see her 1 hour a week under supervision at the Department of Social Services. So she would sit on my lap and cry and ask me why she couldn't come home. And I was not allowed to talk to her about anything to do with the case. So I couldn't tell her why she couldn't come home. I couldn't tell her when she was going to come home. So it was really, this was so hard on both of us.
Yeah.
And I could see how hard it was on her, which just tore me up. So after that, we had court case after court case. We had hearings to go to. They charged me with dependency and neglect, which was that I had allowed Clark to abuse her. That was what I was being accused of. He eventually was arrested, and they charged him with a felony. And the penalty for this was 16 years in prison.
With no proof, no proof whatsoever.
And all so far they talked about was tickling. And so Clark has a great sense of humor. And the only way we could get through this was to kind of, have some humor, fun out of it. And he called it felony tickling. Because what else do you call it?
Right. And I know that, in jail, they don't treat people that they think are child molesters very well. That had to be so scary for both of you.
Yeah, it was. Luckily, he didn't have to stay in jail too long. We got him out on bail.
Good.
But we continued on this way. And every hearing we went to, everything we requested, they ruled against us. The judge would rule against us, and they wouldn't listen to anything that our detective, we had a detective, they wouldn't listen to anything our lawyer said. They completely ignored all the evidence. And my daughter was getting more upset, and I was getting more distraught. This went on for about 4 or 5 months. And then I started seeing a psychiatrist because I thought I'm going to lose my mind. Right. And he prescribed something called Xanax.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it didn't really affect me exactly the right way. I found out later that it can cause suicidal tendencies.
Sure.
So what I did was, after one hearing, I was so distraught and upset that I grabbed some pills, rest of the Xanax, a bottle of painkillers, and a wine cooler. And I drove up in the mountains. I was in Colorado. I drove up in the mountains to a remote location. I was planning to kill myself and do it in such a way that no one would ever be able to stop me or would find me. So I took the pills, and I laid down. There was this big rock there, and I laid down on the rock, and I said, God, if you want me to live, you're going to have to do something, because I can't take this. It's just too painful. And I was obviously out of my mind, because why would I want to leave my children motherless? I mean, that was awful. But at the time, I wasn't thinking clearly.
No, you wanted a way out, and
I did.
That's where we, in suicidal ideation, there's no thought except I can't handle any more of what's going on. And yes. Susan, oh my gosh, I can only imagine that feeling of desperation and helplessness of not being able to help your daughter, not being able to help your husband, and the uncertainty of the future, because it sounded like it was guilty until proven innocent.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And so I took the pills, laid down. After that, I went unconscious. And the next thing I remember was sitting on a curb in front of a grocery store.
What?
Miracle. How did I get there, right?
Yeah.
There's a story. Well, God saved me. He took my challenge and he said, okay, if I have to, I will. And he did. So that's in the book, the description of how that actually came about. And I was saved. Um, but everything continued on. I mean, it was unabated. The pressure continued to mount. Um, she was taken away in February of 85. And then in November of 85, they had the trial. The interesting thing about the trial was that the judge, all they had at that point still was tickling. I mean, it was insane. So the judge, I think he advised the prosecution to give us a plea bargain. So they offered Clark a plea bargain, but it was called something called deferred prosecution, where they said, if you don't get into any kind of trouble within a year, we'll drop the charges. Well, that wasn't good enough for Clark. He wanted to prove it. He was innocent beyond a reasonable doubt, and that was it. And he wanted them completely out of our lives. So he
Good for
refused
him.
it. And that made the judge really mad. So the judge ordered our attorney to send over all of Clark's files to the judge's law partner to review, to see whether our attorney was giving Clark the right advice or not. So his law partner reviewed all the materials and then wrote a letter back to our attorney. And he had 7 points, 7 reasons why Clark was innocent and why he should not even be prosecuted, and why, if he were prosecuted, that he should then turn around and sue them for prosecution.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's your miracle. There it
Well, you would
is.
think so, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, they continued to pursue it. The judge was so mad that Clark was still refusing the deferred prosecution that he told our attorney that he was going to throw the book at him and give him the full 16 years in prison if he was found guilty. So we had to go to trial.
Yeah.
We had a jury trial. And yeah. So what happened in the trial was really interesting, and I describe it in the book, but I won't go into that here. But he was found not guilty, and the jurors came over to us afterwards, and they hugged us, and they had tears in their eyes, and I had tears in my eyes, and they said, "We're so sorry you had to go through this." So I was just in shock, because I mean, up to this point, everybody had kind of deserted us. Your family, your friends, they all kind of wonder, well, why? Here's the phrase we heard all the time: if where there's smoke, there's fire.
Oh,
So they figure, why would they go to all this trouble to prosecute Clark if he really hadn't done anything?
yeah.
So it was bizarre. That was the part where I labeled my life was bizarre. To go
Yes.
through an experience like that.
Oh my gosh. Now, how were your daughters handling all this? Because I know at 15 and being already rebellious, your
Yeah.
older one was probably really struggling. And then the little one not really understanding what's going on. I mean,
No.
how did they handle it?
Well, after a few weeks or so, or months, I can't remember how long it was, they finally put my daughter into the custody of my ex-husband. And he was remarried at that point. He wasn't the greatest father, but it was, oh my, so much better than having her in foster care. So she still was struggling a lot. It was really, really hard for her, because she and I were really close, and she wasn't allowed to come over to the house at all. This all had to be done in social services, 1 hour a week, and that was all we really got to see each other. So that relationship was very painful. My other daughter, she became much more supportive and understanding. So she had definitely calmed down by that point. But it went from bizarre, of they continued to prosecute Clark, to the totally bizarre. So here's what happened next. they had the dependency and neglect case against me for not protecting my daughter from being abused by Clark. Well, they decided that even though Clark was found not guilty, that they were going to continue to pursue the dependency and neglect against me because I didn't believe them.
How does that happen if he's found not guilty? That's just you by default are not guilty because the abuse didn't happen. You're fighting something.
There was nothing to protect her against.
It's a moot point now, right? Oh my gosh.
Then I got pregnant. I found out I was pregnant shortly after the trial. But they were continuing this dependency and neglect case against me, and I was really getting stressed out. And a few months later was going to be the case that was going to go to a hearing. And I was really nervous about it. But 3 days before that date, I went to see the obstetrician for a checkup, and he found the baby had died. So that just completely devastated me. That took me to the absolute lowest of the low point. I mean, everything. I had lost my daughter. I lost my baby. I came close to losing Clark, but we lost our reputation. And we were thousands and thousands of dollars in debt at that point too. And we were not rich by any means. So we were just, I just couldn't take it anymore. But at that point, I mean, I was too low to even try to commit suicide. But I told God, I'm not going to believe in you anymore. I don't see how you could possibly exist and allow me to go through all of this. And I ended up being so depressed that I just signed away my parental rights. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to give up custody. So I did. I just gave up custody and gave it over to my ex-husband. And but that meant that now what they were going to do was force us to all go to therapy until the therapist said, yes, it's okay. Now Clark and my daughter can be in the same room together. So we had to go to therapy. We went to therapy more than once a week. It was just like there was constantly we were going to therapy. And the therapist was in charge of this when Clark and my daughter could actually be together again. So she was still not getting to come over to the house at all. A year later, her report comes out and she says, well, they're doing well. And she has 3 reasons why my daughter should be allowed to come back home again. And one of them was that she completely denied that anything had ever happened. I mean, she was trying to what they call recant. She was trying to say, no, nothing happened. I lied. Everything was a lie. And she told that to the therapist. And yet the therapist said, I believe she still needs to have additional therapy. I don't think we can reunite the family yet. So, this was like more than 2 years after they took her. And still, I'm beside myself. But one thing we started doing was we started a nonprofit organization for other people. We found there were other people who were being falsely accused, just like we were. So we started this organization as a support group, but we did a lot of research into what was going on with the laws, why this happened, whether this was a national problem or just in the state of Colorado. And we learned that there were organizations like the one we started all over the country because this was happening all over the country. And it was just one of those things that it was because of the emphasis in the 80s over trying to eradicate child abuse that they just went overboard, and the laws were changed in such a way that it made it really easy to falsely accuse someone.
Now that was back in the 80s, and we were talking offline how I personally, my opinion
Mm-hmm.
is that the system is still broken. But where did you start? What were the things that you started with, because I mean, that whole ordeal, I mean, the never ending nightmare that you guys were
Mhm.
going through, how do you pinpoint where to even start? Where did you guys start?
Um, well, what I did was once we got to a point where everything was done, I lost the baby, the court case was continuing on. We decided that if we are not going to, we decided to try to sue them also, as was recommended.
Yeah.
Found out we couldn't sue them because they were protected by something called um, diplomatic immunity, or some kind of immunity clause, where you can't sue them unless they allow you to sue them. You have to get permission to sue them. Well, they're not going to give us permission to sue them.
Right. That's the silliest thing
It's
I've
like,
ever
how
heard.
crazy do you think we are? There's just no way. So we knew that wasn't going to work. So we thought, you know what? I'm still so mad and so angry about everything that happened. I can't not do anything. So I was so angry. I thought, well, I'm going to expose what they do. I'm going to make them embarrassed for what they do. I'm going to make everybody see it, and I'm not going to shut up until everybody knows. So I started writing letters to the editor, calling into talk shows, contacting the press association, everything I could think of. So that was what got it started. And then once I started talking about it, then a bunch of other people started contacting us, and that's when we started the organization. And as we continued to all of us talk about it, the organization grew. We started a magazine, in fact, and that we started sending out to people. We were contacted eventually, after all of this publicity, by Ms. Magazine, a national magazine, and they wrote our story up in the magazine. Yeah. And
That's a
by
big
this time,
magazine too. That's
yeah, and
amazing.
Clark had come up with an 800 number by that point, and they put that in the magazine, and our number never stopped ringing. I mean, never. We had to turn the ringer off and just put on just an answering machine message. And we were sending out material to people that were calling us. So we had a whole business going at that point of helping other people, listening to them on the phone, sending them material. We had some things that we sold as well to try to get money as a nonprofit, to get donations. I wrote some grants to try to get additional donations. It was a full-time job, even though I had a full-time job, because we were still paying off bills.
Oh my God.
And eventually we were contacted by an author who wanted to include our story in his book. He was a well-known person. So when his book was published, the Today Show wanted to interview him, and they wanted to interview us too. So we were on the Today Show also. So we had publicity coming out of our ears at that point. And as we continued to promote it, I had an opportunity to begin to talk to the people who were involved in our case. They did, as well as a couple of other people, like the head of the Department of Social Services. He wanted to make changes. He saw that there were problems in his department and in other parts of the system and in the laws. So eventually we were invited to be on a task force to rewrite the laws. And so that was very gratifying. And eventually we became really good friends with this Department of Social Services director. In fact, we still write to each other out weekly, probably, because he's a Christian. He has a newsletter. He sends that out every week. And then I usually write back some comments about it. But, God works in mysterious ways, because that's the last person I would have ever thought that I would be friends with.
Yeah. Yeah. I never knew right there. I mean, I never knew I would have an ally in the head of the department that was causing havoc and
Yeah.
turmoil and trauma in my family. I mean, you're
Yeah.
such an inspiration. And this is for listeners. gosh, if you don't get inspiration from Susan, then I should probably stop podcasting because, oh my goodness, you know that saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
Mhm.
You are, you continue to be. And when I asked the question, where did you start? You were solution minded, not problem focused. You're like, well, this stuff is still going on and I'm angry and I can't get them to listen to me. But you said, hey, I'm just going to be a voice. I'm just going to tell
Mhm.
my story. And that's why I do what I do here and write the books and everything that I do. Tell your story because there's going to be
Mhm.
so many people that can relate. And then your numbers, then you're increasing in these numbers and the phone's ringing off the hook. And you get the attention of the people you were trying to speak to in the first place
Mhm.
by just getting out there and being a voice for all of those that weren't able to speak. And
Right.
I just love that. A task
Yeah.
force, you're on the task force to change a law
Yeah.
where 2 years previously you felt there was no light at the end of that tunnel. There
Mhm.
was no God to help you. There was nothing that you could do. How amazing is that? That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It really was. And we had a national convention, also a conference, national conference with guest speakers from all over the country. Had people come in from all over the country. So it turned into something really big.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Did it help your daughter heal too? Because I always say when we start doing good, it's healing for us. Even though
Mhm.
you're helping, when you start helping others, I think you're doing your healing for yourself.
Yeah.
Did that help your daughter by seeing the positive that came out of it?
I think it did. It was 3 years uh, to the month after they took her that my ex-husband called me and he said, "Would you take custody back of Sarah, of our daughter?" And I said, "Yes, yes, please, yes, I'll take custody." He said that he thought she would do better with me, and he said, well, he started to say she was causing problems, but then he kind of backtracked on that. But I imagine she probably was, because she and I we never lost that bond that we had. We were very close, and we were still just visiting each other, on this monthly or this weekly basis, and that was it. So he said we could have custody at that point, and also we had been cleared finally for Clark to be able to actually be in the same room with her. So finally, social services left us alone, and we were able to get her back into the home. And that was the biggest healing right there, was the fact that she could come back. And she was away from her sister too for 3 years.
Yeah. Oh,
So to have that opportunity to finally come back, to all of us rebond again, and it didn't take long at all before she just got back into the regular rhythm and into the relationship that she had previously with Clark. They still got along really well, and it was, we were healed. In other words, our family was healed. We had made huge changes in the system, and it was definitely one of those things that only God could have put together. I mean, because I would have been dead if it had been left up to me. I would have been dead, and I didn't have any kind of external support really, because, like I said, even family and friends, they don't know how to support something like that.
yeah. They're
So,
either all
mhm.
in or they're out because there's this seed of doubt
Yep.
that is implanted with these accusations. And it's so unfair because human nature is, I'm going to believe
Mhm.
this negative thing rather than just completely ignore. Because, when it comes to the
Yeah.
law is about facts, it's not about
Mhm.
feelings. So that's the difficult part is I may have feelings for someone and then if the law is involved, there must be facts, but there weren't any. And what's frustrating, and I'm dealing with this right now with my own situation, is they want family reconciliation. You
Mhm.
know, you wanted reconciliation for 3 years and it came full circle back to where it should have just stayed in the first place. And yet they had no interest in reconciliation with
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
And there's other times where, like in my case, they give the parents so many rights and they're
Mhm.
not
Yes.
realizing that reconciliation doesn't need to happen,
Yes.
especially when the children are older. So do
It's
you
the
find that it's a case by case since this really blew up and you found out
uh-huh.
how things are nationwide? Is this a
Yeah.
state by
We
state?
we found a lot of situations like what you described, where sometimes they would put children back into dangerous situations, and for no apparent reason. It would be, it would be mind-boggling. It's like they didn't have any common sense. They weren't really using, in fact, to illustrate their lack of common sense and their lack of logic. Here was a conversation that I had with the social services. They said, you have to force Clark to admit that he's guilty. And I said, well, how do you know he's guilty? And they said, well, we know because he won't admit his guilt. That people who are guilty won't admit it. And I said, well, what do people who are not guilty do? What do they say? And they say, here's their answer. Well, we're not really in the business of determining guilt or innocence. We're in the business of putting families back together again.
No,
And I
you're
said,
not.
okay, well, why aren't you doing that for us? And they said, because Clark won't admit his guilt. So, yeah.
Oh, what a circle. What a hamster wheel. That is ridiculous. I'm a fan of true crime because I love psychology and that's my background, and I am a life coach. So I like to figure out why people do things and what are the signs and what do we miss? And so true crime is really fascinating to me. And one of the things that I've said to my husband is we don't have a nation of laws. We have 50 separate countries. And
Yeah.
within those little countries, there's 500 different same laws, if that makes sense. There's
Yes.
no standard operating procedure. You work in a corporation. I worked in a corporation for 26 years. There's a standard operating procedure manual for when this happens, this is what we follow. But sadly, we don't have a justice system. We have a legal system, and that legal system does not have a standard operating procedure. It is based on, I feel, biases by the attorneys, by the judges, by their own perceptions, their own experiences. So think about a judge who's had maybe in a week, maybe he sees 5 to 10 child molesters, and there's proof they are child molesters. They're going to be more biased to this accusation and not apt to look at the facts. And I think we need more of a third party moderator looking at these. Like you said, that judge's legal was his
Is a partner.
partner
Law partner. Yeah.
and said, hey, this doesn't look right. And they still didn't follow that. So there's no, we learned in school, right? The balances that we have to do. God, I lost it's been a long time since I've been in school, but checks and balances.
Yeah.
And why don't we have more checks and balances in our legal system?
And I also majored in psychology. So the theory of personality has always really been interesting to me. And one of the things that was at play here was Clark's personality clashing with the personalities of the people who work in the child protection system. Personality clash. I mean, that was right at the very beginning, and that was a big part of it. That was one of the reasons that they wanted to punish us and punish him, because the difference he didn't have, and he still doesn't. He doesn't have the kind of personality where you can just tell him something and he's going to believe it. He goes by facts. He's very, very research oriented, fact based, logical. That's how he operates.
He can't be intimidated, and the legal system is intimidating. And we always think they know more than we do because they know the laws. And I'm just a lay person. I don't really understand all these laws. And I love that Clark was like, no, we're going to trial. Nope, I'm not admitting anything. I'm not going to admit something I didn't do. Bless his heart for being that strong. Bless his heart for being that warrior that made this whole thing transpire so your voices could be heard and change could be made.
Right.
I'm fascinated and so impressed by the both of you that,
Yeah.
wow. I always say we're given
yeah.
the hardest things because we can handle it because we are strong enough.
Yeah. And speaking of the hardest things, one of the things that was so hard for me was the fact that they kept telling me if I kicked Clark out of the house that I could get my daughter back.
No.
And they used it. It was like trying to force my hand by keeping her. It was blackmail. That's what I would call it, blackmail. They were trying to blackmail me into going along with their prosecution of him because they were so angry with him and they wanted me to cooperate in that. And so they were not going to allow me to ever have custody again.
And I'm going to speak for all the moms out there, as I have 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren now. As a mom, you think, I'm going to have to sacrifice. I'm going to have to do this thing because I love my children unconditionally. You were in this rock and a hard place where I don't want to kick my husband out. I love him and I know he's innocent. And then this other place where maybe we just need to sacrifice because I want my kids and I want to be there for my kids. And also that thought in the back of your head, are people judging? They're judging what kind of a mom I am if I don't do this thing that I'm being asked to do. Kick him. It's easy. Just let him go live in an apartment. You can see him whenever you want to, but you should be a good mom and have your daughter. And that took a lot of strength.
Yeah, it did. And finally, and I fought with myself about that, but I thought to myself, oh, what kind of role model would I be if I caved to this pressure? I want to be a good role model to my children so that they grow up knowing that if somebody tries to pressure you to do something that you know is wrong, you should not give it. You should not cave to that pressure. Stick up for what you believe is right. And I knew that Clark was innocent. And I knew that if I did not stick up for him on his side, he was going to go down. They were not going to stop. So that finally was the thing that convinced me that we were on the right path. Was I had to be a good role model and do what was right.
Isn't that amazing in those moments? And I've talked about this when I was absolutely devastated. I was in a domestic violence abusive marriage and then he had been unfaithful. And I remember that moment where it was ending and I was just devastated and crying. And I said, if I can help one person, I'll go through this. And you just said, I had to make this decision for the greater good of everyone. I mean, you really said, if I don't make this decision, I know what's going to happen. They're going to win. And then there's no change that's going to happen. And everyone going forward in this system is going to be victimized, which you were in this same way. And that in that devastation, you still had that mind to say, I want to be a role model for my kids. And I just think says a lot about who you are as a person. And that takes a strength beyond anything a lot of us can understand.
Yeah. And it wasn't my own strength. And I have to give God the glory in all of it, because all this time when I said, I'm not going to believe in you anymore, all of the things I went through, the times I obviously didn't trust in him and I tried to kill myself, he was there. And I just didn't know it. But now I look back on it and everything that's happened, I can see where he had a hand in it. In fact, getting the book written was a miracle of God, because I had started the book 30 years ago and I had all of the paperwork from the court, everything, all of my manuscripts and everything. I got into a certain point in the book, and when it came to the time where they took her away, I couldn't keep writing. It devastated me again so much, just writing about that. that I just took everything and I just put it all into a box and stored it. And that was like 30 years. 30 years later, I thought that all that stuff had been thrown out. And when we moved into the house that we live in now, I happened to be going through some old stuff and I was going to get rid of a bunch of old boxes of things. And I was just tossing some boxes. I wasn't even looking into a lot of the boxes because I knew they were just old papers and stuff that we didn't need anymore. I was throwing everything out. And then for some reason, I happened to look into this one box and I saw there it was, the manuscript and all of the court paperwork right there in that box. And I thought, well, I could throw it away, but I don't think I can throw it away. And then I thought, what if I could, pick it up and finish the book? So I brought it in the house, put it in a drawer, and then I picked it up and started working on it again. But I was amazed to see after 30 years that was still there.
Yeah. Yeah. But until you were able to just repetitively tell the story and help others, share with others, make these changes in the legal system, all those things have to transpire. You look back at your life and you think, man, at that moment, I didn't see anything happening. And then this happened, and then this happened. And all of it is this chain reaction of what had to happen. And when you say, I knew God was there, he knew what he was doing. We don't know what we're doing because we can't see the future, but it's just that belief that I'm going to be okay. And I think it's such a healing process to write a book. I really do. I tell people to journal. Even if you don't publish, just write it, get it out. And like you said, when I revisited it, I wasn't ready yet. I had to put it away for just a minute. And it's kind of a little check on ourselves to say, are we ready? Are we fully healed? Then we've got more work to do. And that's so amazing. I am just so amazed by you. So now you wrote the memoir and it becomes this bestseller. Of course it does, because my goodness, what a intriguing story. So what happens after it becomes this bestseller? What do you decide you want to do from there?
Well, I learned a lot. I published it myself, and I had decided to start a business just so that I could publish my own book. Because it's a little bit works out a little bit better, to have a business. Then you've got some business expenses and tax deductions and things. So I did it that way. So I created this company called Soul Sunshine, and it's SON sunshine, like the Son of God shining on you. And that was the company that I published the book under. And then God, well, I write poetry too. And I had written probably 200 poems. And I thought, well, the next book I think that I'll do is a book of poetry. So I decided to have it illustrated. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat to have a different artist illustrate each poem? And have one illustration and then one poem, and then all these different artists illustrated. So I thought, if I could even just do 60, I don't know if I can find 60 artists, but that would be really cool. So I put a little post out on Facebook that I was looking for illustrators for this book of poems. I ended up getting, I think, it's still coming in. I'm still getting artists filling out my form, and I noticed, I'm using Google Forms, and so every so often I look again. The last time I looked, I had 130.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I've got this huge directory of artists, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. What can I do with that? And then I realized that there are a lot of authors I saw out on Facebook looking for illustrators of a certain type. They had something in mind. How are they going to find that? Well, the form that I had sent out had a lot of different questions and, links to their portfolios. So I had all that, and it turns into, when you send it to a Google form you can turn it into a spreadsheet. So now I've got this spreadsheet. all of these different, types of styles and all of the information about each of the artists. And I also looked to see what countries they were from, 28 different countries. So I've got artists from all over the world, all of these different styles listed, information about their price range, what they would charge. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to really expand my business and, start to help other authors find illustrators? And I could do it with this database. So some of the artists that I had met in the process of doing the poetry and assigning them a poem to do, I became friends with. Some of them were just wonderful. I mean, just wonderful artists and great people, Christians. Again, we just really connected.
Yeah.
And so I really connected with about 4 or 5 of them very closely. And we decided, well, let's just turn Soul Sunshine into a real business, where this is what we do. And then I thought, well, why stop at just illustrations? Why not just publish people's books right from the beginning? So I've got a good friend in California who has all of the skills for being a book coach. I thought, wow, bring her in. She can be the book coach. She also does editing. So I've got her on board as well. So I've got I've got 7 people now that are working for me. And
Wow.
so we're having a blast. It's
Yes.
every day is a dream come true for me.
Ah,
Every day. And I get to connect with these wonderful people every day. And I found one of the artists was really good at web design. So I've got him redoing my website.
it's funny how it just branches out, doesn't it?
Yes. And I've got another artist who's just really good at seeing what needs to be done in an illustration to make it really work in a story. And so I assigned him to be like the art director, and he helps the illustration, the artist. We assign him to work with an artist. He learns from the author what the author has in mind, and then kind of reinterprets that for the artist in such a way that the artist is going to understand it. So that was another phenomenal idea. And I don't know of any other company that does things like that.
No, I do not. And
Yeah.
I am, in the arena of writing and publishing. So that is amazing. And I'm going to definitely use you. And listeners, if you're interested in any of these ideas of publishing your book and the illustration, that's my favorite part. Yeah, we're going to get you all of Susan's information. I could talk to you forever, but I only have it. So where can they get both your book and how to reach you? What are your websites to find you?
Okay. Soul Sunshine is my website. Again, that's SOULSONSHINE.com. The website is in the process of being revised. So it's not the way that, we want it to be just yet. But you at least will, if you go on the website, you can get contact information. It shows that there's a phone number there, and there's also an email address. So that different ways to get in contact with me.
Perfect. And by the time this is published, it will be, because we're pretty far out. So that'll be really, really good. And then your book is
it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble, Kobo, a lot of the other book sites as well. It's also available in audio version, an audio book, which I narrated, so you get to hear my voice again.
I know. I made the mistake of not doing my own voice, although I love my voice over, but everyone had said you need to do your own voice for your book. So lesson learned. And the name of your book?
It's Wheels of Injustice, Saving My Child from the Child Savers.
What a great, great title. All right. As we wrap up, I have 2 things I usually ask my guests, and we leave it a little bit lighthearted. So the first one is, what is, under 10 words, 1 sentence of what you would tell your younger self?
Don't give up.
Love it. Don't give up, because you don't know what's on the other side of it. And there's a meme where there's someone digging and they realize they're just one step away from breaking through. I've seen that meme on Facebook. And then I do a fun little thing called Take My Money. And in the spirit right now, because we are in holiday season, I find weird and wacky things that people spend their money on or that are for sale or that people must have. So I'm going to give you an example, and then you tell me what you've seen is something that you want them to take your money for. So one of the things I found today were bacon bandages. They're little bandages that look like bacon. And I love bacon. And those are $8.35 on Amazon. And this one is really yuck, but hey, to each his own. I saw today pickle flavored cotton candy.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so awful.
It does. $9.97 on Amazon. You too can have some pickle flavored cotton candy. So what is something you've bought that was strange, or something that you have to have that most people don't, or what you've seen on sale?
Wow. Yeah, I can't think of much. I like chocolate though. So you could make chocolate shaped into anything. And that's what I would buy. I don't care what it is. I mean, chocolate shaped microphone, chocolate shaped doorknob, whatever. And
Yeah.
here is one thing I saw. And I'm fascinated, and I cannot turn off the video when this comes up on my Facebook. There is somebody bakes these cakes that look like real items. Like it might look like a tennis shoe. Well, it looks exactly like a tennis shoe. And they take a knife to it and they cut through it, and it's a cake.
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing because
it's very disturbing. They had one that was a foot, and they had 2 feet right next to each other, and they took a knife and right down the center of that foot, they cut it. It was really distressing.
I think it's I think our brains can't wrap around,
No.
separating the object to a cake. And I've seen it, like I'm a dog lover, and I've seen them do it with dogs, and I'm like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, it's awful.
That's fun. That was a really, really good one. Susan, I thank you. It was such an honor, and I'm so grateful for your time today and for your story and just who you are in this world and for making a change. You show that by taking action, we make a difference. We don't have to be bitter. We can be better. And so I'm so grateful for you today, and I'm so happy that I got to meet you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed meeting you too.
Wonderful. And we will definitely keep in touch, guys. So reach out at soulsunshine.com to get a hold of Susan and go find her book, Wheels of Justice. I can't remember the rest of it.
Wheels of Injustice, Saving My Child from the Child Savers.
There it is. I wrote down when we were talking, I was writing it down, didn't finish. Wheels of Injustice, Saving My Child from the Child Savers on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and you get the audio book. Just wonderful reading. I'm definitely going to grab that book because I'm just fascinated by your story. If you are looking for life coaching, relationship coaching, I'm at lifecoachmaureen.com, and I also do motivational speaking. My new doggy boutique is called mydogiseverything.net, where we sell healthy treats, healthy products, shampoos, lots of fun bandanas, and all things that show our precious puppies how much we love them. So mydogiseverything.net. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for the 5-star reviews. Thank you all for your support, your sharing, and just for being here. We appreciate your time. It's valuable and priceless. And I'm so ever grateful to all of you. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next episode of I Never Knew, But My Dog Did. Thanks, guys.